let's go live, and we are live. Good evening, everyone. It is 8:30 on May 20th, 2025. And we're getting that much closer to the official commencement of the Atlantic hurricane season. Now, the Eastern Pacific is going. The Eastern Pacific is ready to rock and roll, and we're going to start off the stream here momentarily with a familiar but long-awaited sight, something we haven't seen in a while, at least during this time of the year. With that being said, let's go ahead and take you full screen here. I'll get my face out of the picture for now while we let a few more folks join in the chat. There you have it. We have a 0 for 20 AOI out here in the Eastern Pacific. The little narrative says an area of low pressure could form by this weekend or early next week, several hundred miles south of the southern coast of Mexico. Conditions appear favorable for some development of this system thereafter while it moves westward to west-northwestward at around 10 to 15 miles an hour. And there you have it, folks, a 0% shot of anything forming in the next 48 hours and the token 20% over the next 7 days. Now, give me 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and share the stream on my Instagram just to get the word out there. I completely forgot to do that before getting the stream started, or Stream Spotter, Florida. Good to see you all. All right, let's see here. And it sounds like somebody is at my door for some reason. I've had some random folks come into the door for some strange reason all throughout the day today, ever since I got home. So let me copy the link real fast. And my internet looks like it's getting bogged down again, too. So let's go ahead. And I'm going to go ahead and do a little recording here. All right. So anyways, I also want to give an enormous shout out to my girl Kiara for the token shirt here. This is going to be a spectacular addition to the hurricane season. Let me go ahead and pull the thingamajiggy up here. We got it. Hold on to your butts. There it is. The classic. Yeah, I don't know what gives. Something's up with my internet connection. I don't know why it's doing that. It's very strange. I'm going to give it a second. Let me see what's going on here real fast. I'm watching the stream bitrate on OBS. And I swear, for some reason my OBS is dropping frames. I don't know why that has suddenly started so bad. There it goes. It's collapsing big time. So we're probably going to get hit by lag again. Let's see. Now we're back up. Now it's back up. All right, anyways, we're going to go ahead and just rock through. Then I apologize, folks, if I missed your question or anything like that. I will address it towards the back end of the stream. There it goes. It's cutting out again for some reason because we are dropping bitrate for some reason. But we're going to rock through this anyway. So let's go ahead and keep going. We have the Eastern Pacific AOI. And on top of that, nothing in the Atlantic. So I'm just kidding. There's nothing to talk about in the Atlantic just yet, but as the thumbnail of the video implied, I'm going to be watching this area as we go through the dates of June 4th through about the 15th, I would say. Through June 4th through about the 15th, I think, is when we're going to have a little bit of an attempt down here near Central America as a result of our MJO coming right over the top of that area, and I'll show you why. But first, even though we started out with the National Hurricane Center homepage, we're going to go ahead and look at the infrared. We always start off with the infrared unless we have something pressing out there. Couple key features to note. The Ocean Prediction Center just recently highlighted a tropical wave down here off the coast of Central America, moving off towards the west, and that's likely an indication of what's going to try to develop over the next 7 days. Models do seem to be in unanimous agreement that it will likely start to develop into something as we get beyond the 7-day time frame. We'll have to wait and see. I don't think it's going to be anything spectacular just yet. The waters are very erroneous. They're very anomalous. And when I say anomalous, I don't mean warm or cold or general. I'm saying just kind of, they're a little strange. They're acting up because we had our Costero El Nino off the coast of South America for a little bit. That has since collapsed. We have the cooler water still off the Baja Peninsula in western Mexico up and through here. And then we have just a giant warm patch in that same general spot that we've had for the last 2 hurricane seasons since we started tracking them together. Now, on top of that, a lot of our warmth has now been even more so focused over the Caribbean and the Gulf and the Western Atlantic as a result of this upper ridge that has just been stagnant over this region for an extensive period of time. You can see it spinning in that clockwise fashion out there, just kind of doing its thing, keeping us very hot, but not entirely dry here in Central Florida. We're borrowing different areas of moisture from up towards our northwest and southeast. So we've got a little bit of moisture coming in the low-level flow, and then the upper-level flow along the northern side of that, or the apex of the ridge, is coming in at about between 700 to 500 millibars. And we've had a little bit of rain here and there. Last night, I was pleasantly surprised to hear some thunder and lightning here near where I live in Polk County, so that's a good sign. But this is also what I think is going to help to spur a little bit of development out there in the Eastern Pacific. And then as we get into the first couple days of June, we're going to be watching for a signal out here in the Western Caribbean. Also, in other trending news, we've had our first legitimate tropical wave of the Atlantic basin fall off the coast of Africa, and it's sitting right in through here. It's not the most impressive thing to look at. Some thunderstorms embedded along that ITCZ moving off towards the west. Not expecting any development out of it, but if it does continue to transition, which could very well be what the models are picking up on, it could try to wander through the Guianas, Venezuela, the ABC Islands, and then make its way into the western southern Caribbean. Believe it or not, after reading the post-tropical cyclone analysis from Milton, that's exactly what had happened with that system. It came across the Atlantic basin and then borrowed some energy from both our MJO and parts of TD11, which was then eventually upgraded to a tropical storm, and they met in the middle, more or less, in the Bay of Campeche and developed into what we found out to be Maniac Milton. Chris Mazel with the $10 donation. I do appreciate that sincerely. Thanks a ton. An incredible amount for that $10 donation. It means a lot for sure, Chris. So we're going to be watching that tropical wave. We're going to watch what comes off back behind it, and we're also going to continue to watch the ocean temperatures in the Atlantic, because it does look like we're our most favorable corridor for westerly wave progression. WWP, I just made that up, but westerly movement of our tropical waves between 10 and 15 degrees latitude. That seems to be where we're starting to nudge that warmth into place, and we're bullying the cooler anomalies further towards the north into the southern subtropical Atlantic. So let's get into some of the model data. I'll take you full screen for just a moment and kind of move this over a little bit so you guys can see better. There we go. So this is our 12Z European model, and I have the clock stopped right on the 27th of May. This is literally 7 days from now, and you can see our area of interest right there developed on the model, albeit fairly broad and disorganized, but there it is. Once I switch over to the vorticity, you can see it's starting to close up and continuing to strengthen as it does so, moves off towards the west-northwest, and eventually the northwest being tugged towards that northerly bias by an upper trough that's going to move through the Rockies of the United States here in a little bit. All right, now it looks like the chat is coming alive, although the viewers are going up and down big time. It's like we get a sudden influx and then it drops again. So go ahead and hit that like button, please. Share this information if you could be so kind. Let's see, who else have we had join the chat? Twilight Firefly 100, Weather Roamer, April Claremont, PM, Train Spotter Florida, David Lee, David Lay, TG Herman, good to see ya. Mr. Man JJ, good evening, good to see ya. There she is, Kiara's in the chat, just shouted you out a little bit ago. And there we go, we're bogging down YouTube again. So let's keep the flow of the stream going. Let me collect myself here. So as you can see on our 12Z European model, we do have a weak tropical cyclone that does eventually get its act together as we go between the dates of the 25th and the 27th of May. You know, fairly weak, unimpressive, what you'd typically expect getting started at the early periphery of the Eastern Pacific hurricane season, a very broad area of low pressure. This would still probably take on named storm characteristics. First name on the Pacific outlook, or the Pacific side of the spectrum, is going to be Alvin. So we'll continue to watch this as we go over the next few days. You can see the same thing on our lovely 18 Zulu, the Happy Hour GFS. You can see as it continues to work its way westward, the GFS, being the GFS, actually deepens it into a low-end hurricane. Or actually, you know, I'll go ahead and say as far as a high-end tropical storm. It bottoms out at 985 millibars. And for the Happy Hour the Happy Hour GFS run, I have to give it kudos, because usually this is the model run where this thing gets these puppies going to Cat 3, Cat 4 intensity. In fact, if I go back to 12Z, 12Z actually had this thing rapidly intensifying into a very powerful hurricane. You can see right there at a 978 millibar central pressure as we get into the following Wednesday, May 28th, only 3 days away from the hurricane season on our neck of the woods at that point. The 6Z GFS, even worse, had it bombing out to a 960 millibar Category 2, possible Category 3. That's not going to happen. I definitely can lean more towards, surprisingly, what the 18Z GFS is putting out here. Maybe a high-end tropical storm scraping the southern Mexico coastline as it continues towards the west-northwest. And then I'll switch gears here and we'll come back to the western Atlantic so we can look out over the Caribbean. And if you look, there's this broad mess of increased rainfall and shower activity. Just happened. Oh, no wonder why my system was being bogged down. What the heck? My creative cloud just crashed. I don't even know what that is. I don't even know what that was doing open. Let me just leave that. There we go. Hopefully that'll bring back the stream now. Got to find my chat again. It disappeared. There it is. Bring the chat back front and center. I got to get my stream deck configured. That's going to really come in handy once I do. So I can pop things in and out of frame very quickly. Still feel like I'm getting reacclimated to doing these streams on a regular basis. So as you can see, the 18Z GFS keeps a very broad area of low pressure that tries to develop by about June 3rd to June 5th. Doesn't quite do it, though, thanks to that upper trough up over the eastern United States at this point that's going to flip our Pacific North American oscillation backwards, back into that positive phase. So it does inevitably get sheared apart, but the ensembles are what I'm really picking up on. And another very interesting feature here that I just noticed on the, let me go back to 12Z and take a look at this real quick, the European AI model. Because I know at 12Z I didn't quite see any, oh no, actually there it is. So the 12Z AI model also has a little bit of that bunching up of our vorticity over Central America, trying to get squeezed into the Bay of Campeche. But one thing I noticed that's very interesting is as of the 18Z model run, this is brand spanking new, you can actually see that closed low trying to develop right there. Very reminiscent of what Alberto and Chris did last hurricane season. It lines up perfectly with what dates we were thinking could possibly try to produce something here in the Atlantic side of the basin. You can see where my little pink circle there is. That's what I'm going to be focusing on. That's definitely what I'm going to be focusing on. Kevin Hawthorne, good to see you. Thanks for tuning in. I always see you over on our News 6 streams whenever I'm active on there as well. Volume is going to keep going up and down for some strange reason. I don't know why. It's my OBS. I think I really need to troubleshoot what happens to my internet connection whenever I come on stream. It's very bizarre. I don't think hurricane season will be really busy. I really don't think it'll be really busy. I don't see the machinations of a hyperactive season. And truthfully, since we're getting close to the final prediction from our heavy hitter source, NOAA, in my humble opinion, my full-hearted numbers, I'm talking like if I were to make a seasonal prediction for the hurricane season ahead, I would probably err on the lines of 14 to 17 named storms, 5 to 7 hurricanes, 2 to 4 of those becoming major hurricanes. Those would be my official numbers if I had to put out a forecast. A small margin of error between 2 to 4 of each of these indices. I don't like to forecast ACE. ACE, I'll leave that to the bigwigs, the scientists in tropical meteorology, but I would definitely wager anywhere between 14 to 17 named storms for the 2025 hurricane season, 5 to 7 of those becoming hurricanes, and then 2 to 4 of those we'll have to watch closely to see if they become major hurricanes. God forbid any of those named storms make it into the Caribbean or the Gulf, where our ocean heat content is definitely still off the chain. So we're going to be watching this area. Like I said, this would definitely line up with our early season forecast. If you guys recall when we were doing these streams back in January, February, and March, I had told you that I think in June, the southeast, especially Florida, could see a sloppy tropical storm, just a hefty rainmaker, and something that'll definitely bust our drought wide open. Thankfully, get rid of a lot of the aridness and the dryness that we've built up from April and now slowly building building up again as we get away from that rainmaker that we had a few weekends ago and start to dry out courtesy of that subtropical ridge. You can see it right here too. I'll go back to the very beginning of the loop, put up the anomaly chart there. Bam, just a massive subtropical ridge that's just going to continue to spin overhead until that trough comes in by Thursday, Friday. Through the weekend, it ejects out. We're left again with more ridging. That's not the pattern flip just yet. The pattern flip happens as we get into very late May, right there. There it is. And into early June. And that's why I really want to see what happens down here, because this here is a textbook Florida landfall pattern. So if we do get something very silly and sloppy down out of the Central American gyre with the passage of our MJO, it's coming right for us in the southeast, without a doubt. And again, I'm not projecting anything major. We're not talking a Cat 2, Cat 3, God forbid anything stronger than that. This would probably be a tropical storm Andrea, something within maybe 50 to 70 mile an hour tropical storm, trying to get its act together, very broad, and so on. So we're going to keep watching, because especially as this pattern shakes up, you can see right there once I pull this full screen to the United States, not only is this going to bring our shear up over the upper and central Gulf, but that's also going to magnetize any area of low pressure that forms down there near Central America, the Western and Southern Caribbean. It'll pull it right on in towards us. And the Euro probabilities here do a fantastic job of showing that, as a matter of fact. This just recently update. I looked at the earlier rendition while I was at News 6 today, and this is a new model run that is just released just in time for the stream. And if you take a look, this is between the dates of 26 May and the very beginning of June 2nd. But then watch what happens as soon as we get into that date frame that I've been mentioning, between the 4th and the 15th. Bam. Sudden tick up. And then you go deeper into that from the 9th through the 16th. Bam. Something really nice. Pretty decent signals getting pulled in terms of our tropical cyclones. Tropical storms are also there too. You can see the tropical storm probabilities have gone up ever so slightly. They're not a very impressive amount, but they're still there, you can see. And it kind of puts all of us a little bit on guard, if you will. I'm not going to say on alert. That's definitely not an alert signal. This is definitely on guard. Something we'll just have to continue to monitor as we go over the next 7 to 14 days. Now, let's get into some of our ensembles. And if you notice, I'm not focusing too much on the Eastern Pacific. I do apologize for that. I just don't really want to hammer it out too much, because where we stand currently, it doesn't look like anything will be making landfall down there. And we also don't have a distinguishable feature on satellite or an area of investigation to track physically just yet. Once we get that, then we'll take it up a notch or two, and we'll start to dial that in. But we do have our first tropical weather outlook, so it naturally has my attention. But I want us to continue to focus on the Caribbean and the Gulf, especially since we have so many of you lovely viewers down there in Central America, the Cayman Islands, Jamaica, Belize, the Yucatan Peninsula, and then the rest of us up here in the southern and eastern United States. So here's our 18Z GFS ensembles. I'll openly admit I have not looked at these yet. These are hot off the press. You can see that small signal beginning to work its way westward into the Eastern Pacific. And then as we rock into the beginning of June, there you go. You can see that signal really beginning to take off down there in the Caribbean. 12Z looked a little more impressive than this, I'll admit. 12Z definitely had a bit more of a prominent signal. There it goes right there. Pulling up into the Eastern Gulf, the Eastern Gulf out of the Western Caribbean. Had to flip-flop the two. So again, right around that same general time frame, we cross over into the 1st of June. We begin the Atlantic hurricane season, and then a few days after that. That's why I'm giving us such a large margin of error between the 4th and the 15th. If we don't have a prominent, promising signal on our ensembles or even our operational models by about June 4th, I do think we're going to see something all the way out until maybe the 15th. If we don't get anything to really start to show itself by June 15th and we get the passage of the MJO, then yeah, no, it's not happening. It's not happening. Or if the Eastern Pacific continues to try to produce systems and increase our westerly shear across the Caribbean and the Southern Gulf, then we're not cooking anything off either there either. 12's a European model for the first time in a little while now has actually shown a signal out there around the same date and time. If you look, the Euro does have that Eastern Pacific system getting going by about the 26th, the 27th of May, and then as we make that crossover into June 1st, we get a little bit of crossover action, a la whatever this decides to do in the Eastern Pacific. It's pulled into the Bay of Campeche, just like good old Milton right there. The Euro has had a couple of little signals here and there that something may try to lift up and then reemerge. I don't really foreshadow that happening. As that trough digs in, whatever is down there is just going to get stretched out. So I really don't foresee anything really taking shape from that. But then as you get into the month of June, this is where it gets tricky, because once again, you can see the Euro is picking up on the MJO. However, granted, it shows formation beginning initially in the Eastern Pacific. If that happens, this is going to shut down. We're not going to make it. We're not going to have anything happening. It's just going to be a lot of rain out there. But then notice, as we get deeper into the loop, we start to see a couple of rogue members developing near the Central America coastline here, and then one random tropical storm member going right into Tampa Bay. Imagine rerun. Let's run it back. And then the Canadian ensembles have been almost silent all of this time frame. I was going to say the season. The Canadian ensembles have been pretty much silent. They've been mute since we started to get within range of the Atlantic hurricane season beginning. But even this ensemble now, if I go out towards the beginning of June, you can start to see little feature. Yep, see, there it goes. We get that broad area of low pressure trying to develop itself. The gyre really starting to build up right around Central America and the Yucatan Channel. And that's exactly what Idalia and Alberto and who else? Helene, these precursor broad signals. So, nothing to be too overly concerned about, but I think that time frame, again, from the 4th through the 15th of June, that's when we're really going to have to pay close attention to what happens across this region, both in the Eastern Pacific and in our Western Caribbean. This is also something that's been trending on social media as well. These are going to be your extended European model weeklies. And what I want you to see very distinctly is as we get into the beginning of June, so you can see the increase in our precipitation anomalies, above average rainfall in the Eastern Pacific, southern Mexico, as a result of that first system trying to get going. Then, as you fast forward to about the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th of June, notice what begins to happen on this side of the basin as well. I was going to say the Atlantic. And you take it all the way through, and you see something fairly robust lifting up out of the Western Caribbean. Right there. It was even more prominent on yesterday's run. If I go to 0Z on the 19th, look at that. You can clearly see something coming on up out of the Western Caribbean and moving into the Eastern Gulf. Something forms on down in through this general area and lifts up in this general fashion. I'll even draw like a large cone of uncertainty like this. Just lifts northward, being tugged towards the north by that trough that's going to dig in over the eastern United States. The GFS extended range model also shows the exact same thing. Look at that big old blob of enhanced precip action lifting towards the north. And the primary contributor to that is going to be both the Central American gyre, the MJO, as well as this. Take a look at what our PNA is going to do right around that same general time frame. It's going to rapidly shoot into a positive phase, and then we're going to try to trend back down into that negative phase, but it could take a while. And by the time we start to trend out of that troughing over the eastern United States, we're already moving into the beginning of June. If I switch us over to the GFS ensemble, it shows the same thing, an even greater trend towards a positive PNA as we get towards the tail end of this month into early June, and then we replace that with an anticyclone out over the south and east again, which could add fuel to the fire if something does try to get going down there. Last but certainly not least, in terms of our MJO, you can see the GFS is still adamant that as the MJO does propagate through the pattern, we're going to see even more enhanced lift focused on that same general area between the 6th of June and right about there, the 12th, the 13th of June. Obviously, this is going to be a bit of a, wiggling and wobbling, give or take. Could be a little sooner, could be a little after than that, but generally our favorable time frame is going to occur anywhere in this window from about, I'll say it again, from about June 4th to about June 15th, right in through there. You switch over to the latest European model, and you can see the same thing. We've got that weak Kelvin wave floating through the pattern that's going to get the Eastern Pacific likely cranking over the next 7 to 10 days. And then we have the full propagation of our MJO working its way through on this time longitude, or this time phased longitudinal chart here. And again, there's June 6th all the way out to about June 16th, give or take, is when our most favorable upper level support will be in play. And again, I want to echo the same sentiments I said on the GFS. There's always some wiggling and wobbling with this, some finagling. You could start to see the favorable conditions settling in a little sooner than later, and you can also see them kind of continuing to persist in that same geographic region even after the fact. Sometimes I've even read in some documents that it's after the passage we start to see more of the favorable conditions settling in. So we could even make a case that this won't really get us going until about June 11th to almost June 21st. You know, there's always that window of, or I should say that margin of error when it comes to the MJO passing over. Another thing I'd like to point out is the CFS. I hadn't looked at the CFS in quite a long time, but these are your CFS weekly anomalies. And if you go right on in to June 6th to June 10th, and even beyond that, notice that we still have that anomalous precip signal right through there from Central America. And that lines up perfectly. If we switch over to the weeklies on our MJO propagation, there you go. Very beginning of June, we start to see those velocity anomalies increase. That's likely the Kelvin wave having made its way through. And then finally, first week, second week of June is when we have the full MJO moving through. You turn your attention out west or east, however you want to look at it. In Africa, the Indian Ocean are now under the suppressed phase. Same with the maritime continents. We're starting to see that sinking action on the backside of our MJO. And we in the Atlantic and the Eastern Pacific are planted right underneath the favorable phasing. So yeah, that I do think is going to be the time frame that if we're going to get an attempt at something in the Atlantic, I should say especially the Caribbean or the Southern Gulf, it's going to be that time frame. And we have what it is that we need to watch for. We need to watch the PNA fluctuating back and forth. We also need to pay close attention to what that current subtropical ridge does down there in the Gulf, how that influences the Eastern Pacific. We'll also need to watch what the Eastern Pacific does, because if our models tend to favor the East Pac, it's not going to show, or they're not going to show very much development on our side of the spectrum. That's just kind of what happens. When one gets going, the other one tends to get smothered because they're in such close proximity to one another. When did Arlene form in 2025? Arlene hasn't formed. Arlene's not on the list for 2025. Arlene was the first tropical storm of 2023 that formed right on June 1st. But yeah, that's all she wrote. Just in time for the half an hour mark, so we definitely stayed within that time frame I wanted to follow tonight. Does anyone have any questions at all? Anything that I can happily answer before we wrap up this live stream? I'll leave us with the infamous yellow blip. The classic yellow blip. Excellent question, David Lay. Let's go ahead and go over to that real quick. Let's go to the... I know I have it here. Where is it? There you go. So we've seen some interesting up-and-comings out there in the Atlantic. So if you look, we've almost done away with our cooler anomalies in the MDR. So, and this is courtesy of the NOAA Coral Reef SST monitor. Let me see. Can I pull up? I want the actual Atlantic. Let's see, can I scroll over? There you go. That works. I will take that as a win. So if you look, we've bullied a lot of our cooler anomalies towards the north. Still some indications that we have cooler than average pockets of water out there. But all in all, again, from about the 10-degree latitude to the 15-degree latitude, where you typically see your tropical waves progressing westward, especially during August and September, we've definitely warmed it up. I'll go over to cyclonic weather so we can get another look at our OISST. A little bit of a different configuration here, but regardless, right in that same latitudinal zone. There's 10, there's 15. We are bullying those cooler SSTs out of the way. We have a huge pocket of warm water, I'll say. That's AHH, not A, you know what. We got warm water out there off the east coast of the United States, the Caribbean, and especially our shelf waters of the western Florida Peninsula and through the eastern Gulf. So we have a lot of heat loaded up out there. And if you look, that small glimpse we get in the eastern Pacific, you can see the cooler anomalies still hanging out there. So I would almost make a case that once the MJO comes over, and you think about the MJO being our upper level influencer, couple that with all of our heat being loaded up on this side of the Atlantic, kind of stealing some of the lift from the Eastern Pacific, I do see the Eastern Pacific kind of getting smothered for a good majority of its hurricane season. I really do think we're going to have to watch what happens as those waves move through the MDR later on into the hurricane season, possibly even earlier on. We already have a couple waves getting ready to march their way across, so it's anybody's best guess, but I don't quite think we've finished warming up in the actual Atlantic MDR, especially when you look at this gratuitous pocket of very warm anomalies up near Iceland, the United Kingdom, Spain, Portugal, Western Europe. It's going to be caught up in the Canary Current and pulled down, and you can kind of see that already happening. You've got that warm pool here following that southerly current, and we're seeing that fetch of warmer anomalies beginning to progress in there. Here is a look at the 15-day change, and this does an even more phenomenal job. You can see how the warm waters up towards the north are slowly spilling down towards the south. The Gulf Stream and the western side of our North Atlantic gyre is pulling up the warmth up the eastern seaboard. The Gulf continues to warm up, all thanks to that subtropical ridge. So we're definitely seeing a reconfiguring of the Atlantic SST setup. I don't think we're done cooling. I don't think we're done warming up down in the MDR just yet, and I don't think that we're done warming up down here, especially with as much of a negative PNA that we're expected to remain under for the time being and then down the road cross back into. Where did I have it up? There you go. So you can see right here, by about June 1st, if this does hold true and we dip into that substantially negative PNA, we're going to see even more warmth begin to build up over the Caribbean, over the Gulf. And that's about the same time our MJO is going to be passing over, so this will then act like lift, exhaust, to further exacerbate vertical velocities out there. So we'll see. I do think we're starting to come into alignment. I'm going to continue to examine all this and kind of put my thoughts together before we stream again on Thursday, which brings me right to Kevin Rivera's comment. Has NOAA released their hurricane numbers yet? And do you think that we could reach 18 named storms this year? So NOAA, Kevin, will be releasing their outlook on Thursday at around 10 o'clock. I registered for their webinar so I can sit in, write some stuff for News 6, and then we're going to be streaming once again before I take a little family trip the following day, and I go AWOL for a couple days. Also, April Claremont, a very, very, very special thanks to you for the wonderful $20 donation. So Chris Mazzell, April Claremont for the donations tonight. I give you a huge round of applause for that. Thank you so much for showing such genuine support. It means a tremendous amount, especially as we get closer and closer to hold on to your butt season. But yeah, that's all she wrote. I don't know if I would say Alabama is safe. We haven't really gotten into the hurricane season quite yet, and it does look like over the next 3 weeks or so, we're going to have to watch for everybody in the Eastern Gulf, from about New Orleans, from about New Orleans all the way to our western coast here in Florida. Again, that comes with a number of caveats, though. If we don't exploit these optimal conditions during the first half of June, then we're done. We're cooked, as Jonathan and I like to say. Then we're not going to get another shot. I think we're going to have to wait a little while into some portion of July, even further than that, and especially into the month of July, early August, we're also going to be battling that Saharan dust. I have not taken a large look at that quite yet. I should probably start doing that here very soon. I'm going to make a note of that here, as a matter of fact. Start looking at the SAL, the Saharan air layer out there. Because I know that was an enormous factor last hurricane season. But also, I was working on the interview I did with Phil Klotzbach at the hurricane conference. And one thing I want to mention to you all is he specifically said, in the interview that last hurricane season, because we had so much excessive warmth in the eastern and central Atlantic, couple that with a hardy African monsoon, that is what lifted our ITCZ to the north. Now, my working theory, and I pitched this to Jonathan earlier today as well, is if we continue to load the subtropical Atlantic with these cooler anomalies, will that create localized high pressure and wind flow back down into the MDR, kind of supporting our easterly trade winds coming off of the subtropical Atlantic high, keeping our ITCZ a little further down towards the south, kind of like an opposite effect of what we saw last hurricane season. So I don't know. We will definitely see what happens, but based on what he told me and how much hot water we had everywhere across that general area, lifting the intertropical convergence zone up to about 20 degrees latitude, plopping them into the cooler waters, the dry air. If we have cooler water just to the north of that and these cooler anomalies in the southern hemisphere, will that keep our wave train moving at about that 10, 15-ish degree latitude right into those favorable water temperatures and then towards the Lesser Antilles? It's a working theory. We shall see. We've taken some swings we've missed. We've taken some swings and hit home runs. I will openly admit, if we get a tropical cyclone, a sloppy system that comes up into the south, March-ish. So we'll see what happens. We're still definitely holding on to the neutral/cool neutral signal in the signal in the ENSO regions, and that is not likely going to be going anywhere. So, yeah. That's all she wrote. And yes, I agree, Kevin and PM, I do absolutely think Florida is at risk. Most definitely at risk. And by that, I say we'll simply have to keep a close eye on what happens. You know, it's very difficult to pinpoint landfalls. We take our very, very, very best educated guesses sometimes, but neutral seasons do tend to favor the southeast and the mid-Atlantic United States, so my hotspots are still going to remain what they've been since we started to analyze what the data looked like leading up to this hurricane season. But alrighty, everybody, that is it. Silver Steel S. Before I close out the chat, another $10 donation. You guys are such a fantastic audience. On a personal note, I've been going through it recently. It's been rough behind the scenes, both emotionally and mentally, and I've been more stressed than I have been in a long time. So to meet and talk with everybody, and for you all to be such generous individuals and throw donations my way, it means more than I can express through words. 175,000%. So, with that being said, it is 9:08. We have busted the 30-minute cap, but of course, as always, we're having a conversation, having fun, hanging out with everybody, and I will go ahead and let you know in advance, be on the lookout for another live stream between 8:30 p.m. on Thursday. We've got the NOAA Hurricane Outlook release. I'll give you the full debrief on that, and we'll talk about that as well. And yes, NHC did update their PTC forecast in the sense of they can now start to issue things 72 hours out in advance as opposed to just the 48-hour window that they were given when they first introduced the potential tropical cyclone feature. So yeah, they've extended that lead time. They've given us an extra 24 hours as well. So yeah, Thursday evening we'll be back in full swing for another Hold On to Your Butts live stream. No, I'm just kidding. Unless something's popping out there, then maybe. But if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please drop them in the comments section down below upon the conclusion of this live discussion. And please consider clicking subscribe if you are brand spanking new to the channel, or if you've shared this information or have been coming in and out of these streams and have contemplated hitting subscribe. We are now going to start officially dabbling into our recurring tropical updates. It is officially that time of the year, so feel free to hit that notification bell, subscribe if you want accurate and reliable and timely tropical weather updates as we rock through this hurricane season together. This will be the number 3 season we've done this together. We were in 2023 together. It got a late start with Idalia. 2024, we rocked through it, saw a lot of changes here in the Weather Center with News 6, and now 2025, here we go, as those big old thumbnails with the giant arrows say. This just got worse. I'm just kidding. No, nothing's really happening yet. But you guys are a fantastic audience. We have such a beautiful community, and I love each and every one of you, and I can't wait to see. And I say that obviously with a sense of leeriness, like, we don't want people to get hurt. We don't want things to get lost this hurricane season, but I say this in the most positive of senses. I look forward to seeing what this hurricane season has to throw at us, because I know we're all going to be rocking through it and holding on to our butts collectively as a group. Oh, and you guys are very welcome. Christine, Twilight Firefly, April, who else? Weather Roamer, Robbie Lynn, everybody out there sharing the support. Everybody in there, thank you very much for the kind, genuine words. It helps a lot more than you would imagine, to tell you the truth. So definitely please consider sharing this information with your loved ones, anybody you think could benefit from it, and we'll talk to you again very soon. But until next time, this is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.